Reese McGuire was the backup catcher for the Boston Red Sox in 2023. But did he really play like a backup? Find out on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed for free. And who doesn't love free? I mean, if something's free, you might as well take advantage of it, right? So start your day off right with Locked On Red Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Red Sox. Before you forget, definitely download the SiriusXM app because you can actually get the home broadcast of every Red Sox game straight to your phone so you don't have to worry about missing anything. So if you're going to miss a game live on TV and can't watch it, you could at least still listen to it if you're stuck driving or something and can't sit on your couch comfortably and watch the game. So download the SiriusXM app and search Red Sox, and it'll generate every home broadcast for you during the 2024 season so that you don't have to worry about missing anything. In 2023, the Red Sox had their two primary catchers that they platooned between for a lot of the workload in Connor Wong and Reese McGuire. Now, Connor Wong has primarily been looked at as the number one catcher for this Boston Red Sox team, the guy who takes on the majority of that workload and is looked upon to be the guy who you expect to put into big games. And if the Red Sox had been a playoff team in 2023, Connor Wong likely would have been the catcher who got that knock in game one because that's such an important win to start the series off right. And Connor Wong went through a lot during the 2023 season in terms of a major increase in workload. Reese McGuire did get injured for a good portion of the season, and Connor Wong had to step in and take on a lot more of the workload than he's used to, playing a lot more games. And I give the kid credit for that. It's not easy to be used to really only playing every other day to then having to play 6 or 7 consecutive games in a row before getting a day off for somebody else. And it's something that, although was probably a huge challenge for him, also made him come a long way during the season. And that's certainly promising for the future, as what the future holds might not entail Reese McGuire, who has primarily been the Red Sox backup catcher. But to say that he has really stepped into that backup catcher role and done what he needed to do to put his position in a team to succeed would be such a true statement. It is a little under the radar what he did to contribute to this Boston Red Sox team in 2023. Prior to the season starting, I expected there to be the same balance of workload where it's every other day Reese McGuire starting and every other day Connor Wong starting. And I expected them both to be below average because what I've seen from the two of them together prior to 2023 was not anything super outstanding. And I kept saying the Red Sox really do need to figure out their catching situation for the near future because they were not exactly in a situation where they had a stable catching situation, especially after they did trade Christian Vasquez during the 2022 season. He was not the best offensively towards that later part of his career in Boston, but he was a great defensive catcher and obviously a great clubhouse leader, and he was missed. And when the Red Sox acquired Connor Wong in the Mookie Betts trade, I was hoping to see more from him than what he came in and showed. So then when the Red Sox acquired Reese McGuire after moving Vasquez, I had high expectations for him because he was stepping into the shoes of somebody who had spent so much time in Boston and was so dedicated to the organization and what the Red Sox are about, and certainly made his mark, especially on the defensive end of the ball, and being able to come up with some big key plays. Now, McGuire, towards the end of that 2022 season when he was first brought in, didn't do exactly anything to wow me. I said, well, this guy kind of does the bare minimum. He's a backup catcher. That's probably all that he'll ever be during his time in Boston. And I wasn't expecting him to make this vast improvement or to be a huge, valuable piece of the team. And ultimately, at the end of the day, he likely isn't going to be in Boston long term because Kyle Teal is waiting in the rafters here to come up to the majors eventually. He's moving pretty quickly through the minor league system. So the chances of him coming up sooner rather than later are pretty high. So at that point was when Teal does come up, they'll likely have Connor Wong as the number 2 catcher, and McGuire would be the one that is kind of the odd man out that isn't needed anymore. But for somebody who has primarily been looked at as a backup catcher in Boston, he certainly has done his fair share of contributing to this team's overall goal and being a key asset, especially offensively. And heading into the season, my main expectation for him was that he was still going to do the bare minimum in 2023, and he was going to be the type of guy who, yeah, sure, is a backup catcher, isn't great at the plate, has okay defense, and doesn't do anything that's overly impressive to the point where I would change my mind about him or the player he was. But he had a good 2023 season to the point where you could almost argue that he did more to contribute in his time playing out there on the field than you would primarily expect from a backup catcher. And coming up, I'm going to be diving into what made him the catcher that he was in 2023 and why his performances on the field were a lot better than what was expected. How do you feel about sports betting? Is it something that you've always been interested in? Is it something that you're just getting hooked on? Or is it something that you simply haven't really dabbled with much at all? Regardless of what your situation is, you can find your sports betting home with FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. FanDuel is a lot of fun. The best thing about it is all the different sports you can bet on. There's such a good variety of different bets you can make, and they honestly do try to make it better friendly so that you can win as much money as possible. Because you know how there are some sites out there that make it impossible to win? That's not the case with FanDuel. They truly want you to win money, and that's the goal that they have. So if you're at all interested in sports betting of any kind, head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make sure to win yourself good money. Also, download the SiriusXM app because you can actually get the home broadcast of every Red Sox game straight to your phone, so you don't have to worry about missing a single pitch. It's honestly a great feature to have, and it's something for anybody who doesn't like missing games at all. 162 games is a lot. And if you miss a game, it's hard to be able to make up that game because then the next game is going to come along. So it's a grind. It's a long season. But if you want to feel like you're still involved in all of the action, regardless of if you can't watch a game, you can at least do that by listening. So download the SiriusXM app and search Red Sox, and you can have that exact scenario happen for you so you don't have to worry about missing a single pitch in 2024. Speaking of 2024, is Reese McGuire a feasible catching option that will at least help move the chains in 2024 and make the Red Sox a contending team again? Yes. In 2023, he had a good season. At the plate, he had 187 at-bats, hit 50 hits and 1 home run with a 267 batting average. He also scored 15 runs and had 16 RBIs with 2 stolen bases. His on-base percentage was a .310 and his slugging was a .358. All of this is important because although he is very much not a power hitter and you won't get home runs out of him, he will find ways to get on base other ways. That 267 batting average is important. Across Major League Baseball in 2023, catchers averaged a 236 batting average, and he's above that with that 267. And he was also injured for part of the season. So when you look at his numbers, you want to consider the fact that he did miss some games with an injury, because if you miss games, sometimes if you come back, you might be a little bit rusty or might not play the same into the same level of effectiveness as you were playing to prior to that injury. So one thing about Reese that I was impressed by was his ability to perform well at the plate, even when he came back from his injury, and he was able to make contact, get himself on base, and he was good at getting big hits in situations where he needed it. He's a very disciplined hitter in terms of his plate discipline. He swings at about 44.3% of pitches outside the strike zone and about 63.0% of pitches inside the strike zone. So obviously it's expected that the number will be higher for inside the strike zone as long as the hitter has a good concept of plate discipline and what they should and shouldn't be swinging at. This is something that somebody like Cedar Rafaela still needs to work on, is not being so swing happy and wanting to swing at everything, which although I admire the aggressiveness and wanting to always make contact, there are pitches sometimes that you have to lay off. And I'm sure with time, he'll get used to that and get better at it. But that's something that helped Reese a lot to be able to succeed during the 2023 season. His swing percentage overall is a 52.2%. So he's swinging at a little more than half of the pitches thrown to him, which means a couple different things. It means, one, he is more confident than not that he'll be able to hit the pitch that he's getting, which is good because you need to have that confidence and you need to feel like your resume of what types of pitches you can swing at is more varied. So him swinging at more than half of the pitches that he's thrown is a promising sign from that standpoint. But the other thing about that is he does need to be maybe a little more wary in certain situations, that maybe there are certain pitches from certain pitchers that might not be the best to swing at, but overall, his numbers of swinging percentage is about where I'd like it to be, because I would be a little bit concerned if it said he was swinging at about 75% of the pitches, because that is, to me, getting a little bit too swing happy, not making contact with the right types of pitches. But on the same token as all of this, his contact percentage overall is 78.8%. He's making contact with 88.2% of pitches that are thrown in the zone and 68.9% of pitches thrown outside the zone. So he can make contact with the ball a lot. The question is, where are those balls going? He tends to hit a lot of ground balls, which is pretty normal for a catcher, but he can slide those through every once in a while for singles. Not a fantastic base stealer, as I mentioned earlier, but he is able to have an ability to recognize what's in and out of the zone. And even when it is out of the zone, a lot of the times he was able to still make contact with it. And that was something to me that stood out about him as a hitter, was that he felt confident in his abilities to make contact with the baseball. Sometimes there are hitters who kind of shy away from swinging at a lot of things in general. And yes, a lot of times those hitters will take walks, and it is important for hitters to take their walks for sure and make it more challenging on the pitcher and make him work a little bit more. But you also want to not be afraid to make contact. And I've seen people on both ends of that. Some hitters who are too swing happy, where they get to the point where they strike out a lot because they're not really recognizing the pitches and rather just swinging at whatever comes their way. And also guys who don't really swing at much at all and end up just taking a lot of walks because they don't want to take those risks. Reese McGuire is about somewhere in the middle. He's swinging at a little over half the pitches, but there's also a good amount of pitches that he's willing to not swing at. So from his selection of what he's swinging at, he's in a good position. One thing that's worth noting is his fielding and just his ability to play defense. So one stat that's used when it comes to gauging defense of a player is a putout, which is a fielder's basically ability to actually record out. So it's the literal number of times that that specific person is the fielder who physically recorded the act of completing an out, whether that be stepping on the base for a force out, tagging the runner, catching a batted ball or foul ball in this case because he's a catcher, or catching a third strike. So anything that he physically does to record the out is what goes along with that put out stat. Now in 2023 in Boston, he recorded a total of 451 putouts. That's a pretty big number. That means that defensively, he was more active in games than it might have seemed like he was, and he was able to be the one to be responsible directly for recording an out. So that's one thing about his defense that's certainly positive. His fielding percentage overall was a 998 in 2023. Also very good. So he's maneuvering his way through the defensive side of the ball pretty well. He's able to make outs in a variety of different ways, which is important if you're a catcher, because there are times where you need to bail your pitcher out. And he is somebody who's been able to do that more than once on the baseball field. So that's a positive about him. One thing that could definitely use some improvement for him on the defensive side is his framing. He's getting a strike rate of about 48.1% according to 2023. And they go by zone basically to measure what area of the plate and strike zone you're getting called strikes. So the upper left corner, if you're facing the plate, is one where he gets a strike called 23.8% of the time. His highest number was zone 14, which is if you take basically the left side of the plate, if you're looking at the plate, and to your left, that's on that left side of the plate, either inside or outside, depending on if the hitter is a righty or lefty. He got strikes called 63% of the time in that zone, which is zone 14, and 62.9% of the time on the opposite side, going across to the right side of the plate next to it that way. So he's getting a lot of strike calls when the ball is slightly inside or slightly outside. And that's a good thing because there are so many borderline pitches that are thrown in that vicinity. And a good catcher will be able to make that a strike and help the pitcher out. So anything that you see that's a borderline pitch that could be outside or could be a strike, McGuire is getting those strike calls on those a lot of the time. One thing that he's not getting strike calls on a lot is zone 19, which is the front right corner of the plate. And basically, if the pitcher plants the ball to that front right corner to try to get a hitter to chase, he's only getting a strike call about 17.0% of the time in that zone. So I'd like to see his level of strike calls when the ball is either on the right or left corner increase. It is a little better when the ball's in the left corner at 34.8%, but pitchers do like to try to throw a ball to that vicinity and plant it there to try to get an opposing hitter to chase it. So if McGuire can bump up his ability to frame a little bit better in those areas, then he'll be a much better defensive catcher. Overall, though, he was a lot better during the 2023 season than people really gave him credit for because he was hitting above average relative to other catchers in a lot of areas. And defensively, he certainly did get the job done. And yes, he made some mistakes, but he did a lot of what he had to do in his role as a backup catcher. He didn't throw a lot of guys out who were trying to steal bases. So that's something that he also could use improvement on. But overall, he had a good 2023 season, and there isn't really that much more that you could have asked for from a backup catcher. So I'm curious to see how that continues in 2024, and I'm going to be touching on that a little bit next. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This is very exciting for Locked On. Nobody else has a 24/7 sports streaming channel. So if you're ever at the point where you can't scroll through Twitter or don't have time to use that avenue to catch up on what's going on, then you can just go to our YouTube channel for Locked On Sports Today and get caught up in all of the latest sports news so that you don't have to worry about missing out on anything. And it's fantastic because no matter what time zone you're in or where you are at, there's always something running on that stream. And Locked On has some very talented hosts, so you'll see a lot of faces on there of other fellow Locked On hosts of mine, and it's a great way to really feel like you're keeping yourself up to date on everything that goes on. So subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. And speaking of subscribing, you can subscribe to Locked On Red Sox on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes for free. So don't forget to just share it with your friends and family and leave a rating and a review, because it's always a great time bringing new Red Sox content, although this offseason has been incredibly slow for them. And I just wonder when more moves are going to be starting to be made. But you can certainly catch the episodes of the show anyway. So just subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or on YouTube, as well as subscribing to Locked On Sports Today. Reese McGuire served as a solid backup catcher for the Red Sox in 2023. The question now becomes, what does the future hold for him for 2024 and beyond? He likely will still be the guy again in 2024 as the backup catcher, because Kyle Teel is not going to be able to start the season in the majors. He might not even start in AAA. He might end up staying down in AA, which is where he was playing in 2023, and then maybe working his way up into AAA towards the end of the 2024 season, and then maybe starting in 2025 at the major league level. But either way, there is still going to be a period in between, and maybe he moves quicker than that, and his timeline is he sees some playing time in the majors in 2024. But whether he comes up during the 2024 season or before the 2025 season, there is still going to be a bridge period in which Connor Wong and Reese McGuire are the guys. And what does that mean for Reese? He's going to have a really good 2024 season if he wants to secure a spot after the Red Sox bring Kyle Teel in. And this could be beneficial for Boston, because if he has a good season similar to what he had in 2023, and he's able to be as effective as he was at the plate, especially, and the Red Sox feel like Kyle Teel is ready to come up by the trade deadline in 2024, that could be a great opportunity to trade Reese to a team who maybe is looking for a backup catcher and get some value in return for him. It would be extremely beneficial for Boston from that standpoint, and also from the fact that once the Red Sox do have their two catchers of the future in Kyle Teel and Connor Wong, they can then look back on it and say, the backup catcher that we had until Kyle Teel came up proved to be a good choice from that standpoint. Now, I am worried a little bit at the fact that he might degress in 2024. I think 2023 just happened to be a really solid season for him, but I'm not confident enough based on his past seasons and past performances that he's had prior to being in Boston in 2023 that he can be consistent enough. If I saw consistency throughout his career so far, it would be a different conversation that we're having and a different mindset that I have towards his 2024. I hope his season ends up being similar to what it was in 2023, but to err on the side of caution, I feel like we are going to see some degression from him at the plate, and the Red Sox have to be prepared for that, but they may not be too worried about it because they know that Teel is right around the corner, so they don't necessarily need a full season of Reese's skills. But to me, I hope that he is able to play the full season, or as long as the Red Sox need him for, and that he can stay healthy, because once he went to the IL, the catching situation was such a mess last year. Obviously, it was Connor Wong getting more and more productivity, but they also kind of switched between a couple different backup catchers that also didn't really pan out. So I hope the Red Sox don't need to end up in that situation. Give Teel the time he needs to develop and have Reese stay healthy so that he and Wong can platoon again for as long as they need to until Teel is here. The reality of the situation is the future does look pretty bright from the Red Sox catching perspective. Hopefully Connor Wong can continue to grow in 2024. But as far as what Reese McGuire did for this team, it was a little underrated of productivity, and the numbers really are above average in a lot of different ways. And all you can ask for from a backup catcher is for them to do their job, do what they need to do to help put the team in position to succeed. And then everything else will fall into place the way that it is supposed to or needs to. So props to Reese for having the season he had in 2023. I do expect those numbers to drop a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad catcher in 2024. I don't think that'll be the case at all. I think he'll still be a decent catcher, but I feel like because of the lack of consistency, throughout his career as a whole, I expect his season to not be as good as it was in 2023. And that's okay. Because again, if it's not, this is a temporary solution before the final one comes in of bringing in Kyle Teal to be a catcher of the future. So we'll see what happens. But like I always say, keep the faith and also subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube so you can get the first ever 24/7 sports national streaming channel and not have to worry about missing out on anything. So do that today. Let's go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.